Sit comfortably, take a deep breath and rest your mind for a moment. Today we're going to explore something deep yet simple. Why don't Buddhists believe in God? Now, this isn't about pushing any agenda or saying who's right or wrong. Instead, this is about understanding Buddhism's unique perspective. A perspective that focuses not on divine beings, but on something much closer to home, your own heart and mind. Today, I want to share something that might surprise you, or perhaps even challenge what you believe about life and God. Have you ever wondered why Buddhists don't talk about God the same way other religions do? You see, it's not because Buddhism is against God or anyone's beliefs. It's just that the Buddha had a different priority: to end human suffering. That's where he placed his focus, right here in this life, in this moment. You might be thinking, but wait, don't all religions believe in a creator, someone who made everything? And that's a fair question. So today, I'll explain what Buddhism teaches about this in plain, simple words, like an old monk sharing stories by the fire. No difficult terms, no confusion, just clarity. Whether you believe in God, question God, or don't think about it much at all, it doesn't matter. This is a space for anyone who's curious about life, suffering, and the path to wisdom. So let's sit together, listen closely, and reflect. Shall we begin? Now, before we move deeper, let's pause for a moment and think about something. What do people usually mean when they say the word God? For most people, the idea of God is clear: an all-powerful, all-knowing creator, a being who made the universe, watches over us, and decides what happens to everything. This belief is central in many religions like Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. But here's where Buddhism takes a slightly different path. You see, the Buddha didn't spend his time talking about a creator God, not because he denied it or opposed it. No, instead, he felt there was something more urgent to focus on: our suffering. Let me ask you this. If your house is on fire, would you stop to ask who built the house, or would you try to put out the flames? The Buddha saw that life is full of challenges, pain, loss, worry, fear, and he wanted to help people put out those flames of suffering. Questions about where the universe came from or who created it. To him, those questions weren't as helpful when someone was struggling right here, right now. So when people came to the Buddha asking, "Does God exist? Who created the world?" he often stayed silent. Not because he didn't know, but because he wanted people to focus on what matters most, understanding their own lives and finding peace. Now, you might be thinking, wait, if the Buddha didn't answer these questions, does that mean Buddhists don't believe in anything? Good question. We'll get to that soon, so stick with me. All right, my dear friends, let's settle into this next part. Now, many people hear that Buddhists don't talk about God much, and they scratch their heads. They wonder, why? Isn't that one of life's biggest questions? But here's the thing. The Buddha wasn't a philosopher, sitting around debating the origins of the universe. He wasn't interested in big, complicated ideas that don't help us live better lives. The Buddha was like a doctor. Imagine you go to a doctor with a fever. Do you want the doctor to start telling you stories about where diseases come from, going all the way back to ancient times? No, of course not. You just want the doctor to treat your fever and make you feel better, right? That's exactly how the Buddha approached life. He looked around and saw people suffering. People were sick, grieving, angry, lonely, or afraid, and he thought, what's the cure for this? For the Buddha, the cure for suffering was the most important thing. When people asked him, does God exist, or who created the universe? Buddha often stayed silent, not because he didn't care, but because those questions don't solve the suffering that we experience in our everyday lives. One day a man asked Buddha, why don't you answer questions about God or the beginning of the universe? Buddha told him a story. Imagine a man is shot with a poisoned arrow. His friends rush to help him, but the man says, wait, I won't let you pull the arrow out until I know who shot it, what his name is, where he lives, and what kind of wood the arrow is made of. Buddha smiled and said, that man would die before he got his answers. The point is simple. Worrying about who created the universe won't help us deal with suffering in the here and now. If we focus on treating the poisoned arrow, the pain, fear, and struggles in our lives, then we can find peace. So Buddha turned his attention to practical questions. Why do we suffer? Can suffering be stopped? How can we live with more peace and happiness? And from this focus came the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, which are at the heart of Buddhist teachings. You see, the Buddha was less concerned with why is the world here, and more concerned with how do we make life better while we're here. Now, this doesn't mean the Buddha rejected God or told people not to believe. No, he simply said, find what brings peace to your heart. Don't waste time debating things that won't end your suffering. And for many Buddhists, this practical focus is what makes the teachings so valuable. Buddha gave us tools to live happier, freer lives without needing to rely on answers about the unseen or unknown. To him, life was like a path. You don't need to know where the road was built or who laid the stones. What matters is walking the path to where you want to go. So, dear friends, when you hear that the Buddha didn't focus on God, remember this. It wasn't because he was against belief. It was because he cared more about easing your suffering than answering questions about the stars. Now, dear listener, this is where things sometimes get a little tricky, so I'll keep it as clear as a calm lake. When people hear that Buddhists don't focus on God, some assume Buddhists are atheists. Others think they must not believe in anything at all. But the truth is far more subtle. Buddhism is what we call a non-theistic tradition. What does that mean? It simply means that Buddhism doesn't rely on the idea of a creator God, the kind of all-powerful being who made the universe and watches over it. But now listen closely. This doesn't mean Buddhists are against the idea of God. It's not about denying or rejecting anyone's beliefs. It's more about understanding life and reality in a different way. Let me explain. You see, in Buddhism, the focus is on you, your mind, your actions, and your understanding of the world. The Buddha taught that we don't need to depend on an external savior to free us from suffering. The power to find peace, wisdom, and happiness is already inside us. Think of it like this. Imagine you're lost in a dark forest. Some religions might say, call for help, and someone will come to save you. But Buddhism says, why wait for someone to find you? Light a lamp, trust your own steps, and walk out of the forest yourself. That's what makes Buddhism unique. It's not about looking outside for answers or salvation. It's about looking within. Now, you might be wondering, but don't Buddhists believe in gods or supernatural beings? Good question. Here's the answer. In many Buddhist traditions, you'll find stories of gods, deities, and heavenly beings. But these aren't like the all-powerful creator God that other religions talk about. In Buddhism, these gods are seen as symbols. They represent qualities we all have within us, like wisdom, compassion, courage, and kindness. They're not creators or judges sitting in the sky. They're reminders of the enlightened qualities we can develop in ourselves. Let me share an example. You've probably heard of Kuan Yin, the goddess of compassion in many Buddhist traditions. People pray to her for comfort and strength. But from a Buddhist perspective, Kuan Yin isn't an all-powerful being who grants wishes. She's a symbol of the compassion that's already inside you. When you pray to her, you're really connecting with your own ability to be kind, patient, and understanding. So, in a way, these gods and deities are like mirrors. They show us what's possible within our own hearts and minds. That's why Buddhists can respect all beliefs. If you believe in a creator God, that's fine. If you don't believe in any gods, that's fine too. Buddhism doesn't force you to take sides. It simply says what matters most is how you live, how you treat others, and how you understand your own mind. At the end of the day, whether you believe in a god or not, we all face suffering. We all feel sadness, pain, and fear. And the Buddha's teachings are here to help anyone, regardless of their beliefs. So, you see, Buddhism is not against God. It's just a path that says, you already have everything you need inside you. It's like planting a seed. The seed of wisdom and compassion is already in your heart. You don't need to wait for someone to water it. You can do it yourself, with your actions, your thoughts, and your understanding. In Buddhism, this is what matters most, living a life of kindness, awareness, and peace. Whether you believe in gods or not doesn't change that. And that, dear friend, is why Buddhism is called a non-theistic tradition. It doesn't focus on a creator, but it leaves room for everyone to walk the path in their own way. So, if you're still wondering, do Buddhists believe in God? I'll say this: Buddhism isn't about believing, it's about knowing for yourself, through your own experience. And that, my friends, is a simple truth we can all reflect on. Now, this is a question that many people ask: why don't Buddhists believe in a creator God? It's a good question, and one that deserves an honest answer. The reason isn't because Buddhists reject God or because they are against people who believe in one. No, it's much simpler than that. Buddhism isn't about beliefs, it's about seeing reality as it is, right here and now. Let me explain. The Buddha taught that each of us has the power to find freedom from suffering. This freedom or liberation doesn't come from someone else saving us. It doesn't come from praying to a higher power. It comes from understanding ourselves, our actions and our minds. Think about it like this. Imagine you're carrying a heavy backpack full of stones. Each stone represents your worries, fears and attachments, the things that cause you suffering. Now, would it make sense to wait for someone else to come along and take the backpack off your shoulders? Or would it make more sense to put it down yourself? The Buddha said, you don't need to wait for someone to save you. You can save yourself. This is why Buddhism doesn't rely on the idea of a creator God. The Buddha believed that every single one of us has the wisdom and compassion we need to free ourselves from suffering. It's already inside us, we just have to uncover it. The Buddha often used the image of a lamp. He told his followers, be a lamp unto yourself. What does this mean? It means don't wait for someone else to light your way. Trust your own wisdom, walk your own path. You see, in many religions, people look to a higher power for guidance or salvation. But in Buddhism, we don't need to look outside ourselves. The path to peace and happiness is within us. Here's a story to help explain. One day, someone asked the Buddha, if there's no God to guide us, who can we rely on? The Buddha smiled and said, you can rely on yourself. You can rely on your own wisdom and effort. This is what we call personal responsibility. It's the idea that our happiness is in our own hands. If we act with kindness, patience and understanding, we create peace for ourselves and others. If we act with anger, greed or hatred, we create more suffering. It's like planting seeds in a garden. If you plant good seeds, seeds of kindness, honesty and compassion, you will see good things grow. But if you plant seeds of negativity, you'll only see more problems arise. This is where the teachings of karma come in. Karma simply means cause and effect. Every action we take, whether it's a thought, a word, or something we do, has consequences. These consequences shape our lives like ripples in a pond. And here's the important part. You don't need a divine judge or a higher power to decide what happens to you. The universe isn't keeping score. You are the one who plants the seeds, and you are the one who experiences the results. Let's think about it this way. If you throw a ball against a wall, it bounces back to you, right? Karma is like that. Your actions come back to you in one way or another. Now, this might sound a little scary, like everything depends on you, but it's actually very empowering. It means you are not powerless. You don't need to wait for someone to fix your life or save you. You have the ability to make your own choices and create your own path. This is why the Buddha didn't focus on a creator God. He wanted people to understand that we don't need to rely on someone else to solve our problems. The Buddha's final words to his followers were, all things are impermanent. Work out your own liberation with diligence. What does that mean? It means don't waste time waiting for answers from outside. Focus on what you can do to create peace, kindness and happiness in your own life. Buddhism teaches us that we already have everything we need inside us. Wisdom, compassion, strength, it's all there. It's like having a hidden treasure buried deep in the ground. You just need to dig for it. So, my friends, when people ask, why don't Buddhists believe in a creator God? The answer is simple. It's because Buddhism teaches us that the key to happiness is in our own hands. We don't need to look to the sky for answers. We can look within. If you can trust yourself, understand your mind, and act with love and kindness, you'll find the peace you're searching for. That's the essence of the Buddha's teachings. All right, let's talk about two ideas that are often misunderstood, karma and rebirth. Now, you might have heard the word karma thrown around a lot, especially when something bad happens. People say, "Ah, that's karma." But what does karma actually mean? Let me explain it to you the way my teacher explained it to me many years ago. Karma is a Sanskrit word that simply means action. That's it, just action. But when Buddhists talk about karma, we don't just mean physical actions. Karma also includes our words and even our thoughts. You see, every action we take creates a ripple, like dropping a stone in a pond. Those ripples spread out and affect our lives and the lives of those around us. In other words, everything we do has consequences. Let's use a simple example. Imagine you plant a mango seed in the ground. What will grow? A mango tree, of course. You won't get apples or oranges, you'll get mangoes. That's karma. Your actions are like seeds, and the results are the fruits. Good actions plant good seeds. Bad actions plant bad seeds. Now here's something important. Karma isn't about punishment or reward. There's no divine judge keeping score. No God is deciding what happens to you. Karma is just cause and effect, like throwing a ball against a wall and watching it bounce back. Let me share a story to make this clear. A man once came to the Buddha and asked, "Why do good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people? Where's the justice in that?" The Buddha smiled gently and said, "It's like planting seeds in a garden. Some seeds sprout right away and some take longer, but every seed will grow when the time is right." What does this mean? It means that sometimes the results of our actions don't show up right away. It might take days, years, or even lifetimes for the effects to appear. But just as a seed eventually grows into a tree, our actions will always have consequences. This brings us to the next idea, rebirth. In Buddhism, rebirth is not about having a permanent soul that moves from one body to another. Remember, the Buddha taught that there is no unchanging self, no fixed soul. So what is rebirth then? Imagine a candle. If you light another candle from its flame, the first candle doesn't move into the second one, but the fire continues, right? Rebirth works in a similar way. When we die, the energy of our thoughts, actions, and habits continues into a new life, like one flame lighting another. In this way, what we do in this life creates the conditions for the next. If we act with kindness, patience, and wisdom, we create the causes for happiness, whether in this life or the next. But if we act with hatred, greed, or ignorance, we create the causes for suffering. Here's a simple example. Imagine you're angry all the time. You yell at people, blame others, and carry that anger with you. What happens? You create a life filled with conflict, stress, and unhappiness. It's like living in a storm that you created yourself. But if you practice kindness and patience, even when life is difficult, you create peace, not only for yourself but for those around you. And this peace doesn't just stay in this life. According to Buddhism, it carries forward. The habits we create now shape what happens next. Now, I know what you might be thinking. What if I don't believe in rebirth? Does that mean karma doesn't matter? Oh, that's the beauty of Buddhism. You don't have to believe in rebirth to understand karma. Even if you think this is the only life you'll ever have, the principle of cause and effect still applies. If you act with kindness today, you'll see the results in this life, through happier relationships, a calmer mind, and a greater sense of peace. So whether you believe in one life or many lives, karma teaches us one simple truth. You are the creator of your own destiny. This is why the Buddha didn't focus on a creator God. He taught that we don't need a divine judge or heavenly accountant to keep track of our actions. We are the ones who set our future into motion. Through what we do, what we say, and even what we think. To put it simply, plant good seeds and good things will grow. Plant bad seeds and suffering will follow. Karma is not a punishment or a reward. It's just the natural flow of cause and effect. And rebirth? Well, whether you believe it or not, it reminds us to live wisely today because our actions shape the future. So, my dear friends, ask yourself this: what seeds are you planting? What kind of life are you creating with your actions, thoughts, and words? Because as the Buddha taught, you are your own master. You are your own refuge. And that, my friends, is the simple truth of karma and rebirth. It's not about waiting for someone else to save you. It's about understanding that you have the power to shape your life, one action at a time. Now we come to a teaching that confuses many people when they first hear it, the idea of no self, or what we call in Buddhism, anattā. At first it might sound strange. You might think, what do you mean I don't have a self? I'm sitting here, I'm breathing, I'm thinking, I feel very real. Yes, you are real, of course you are, but Buddhism teaches that there is no fixed, unchanging self, no eternal soul that stays the same forever. Let me explain it this way. Have you ever watched a river? If you look at the water, you see that it's always moving. It flows constantly, never still, never the same. The river you see now is not the same river you saw a moment ago. The Buddha said we are like that river. Our thoughts, feelings and bodies are constantly changing. There is no unchanging I or me, just a flow of experiences. Now you might ask, but why does this matter? Why should I care about whether I have a self or not? Here's why. Because clinging to the idea of a permanent self causes suffering. Let me tell you a story. Once a man came to the Buddha and said, I am always unhappy and I don't know why. The Buddha asked him, what do you cling to? The man replied, I cling to my identity. I cling to my pride, my opinions, my possessions. I'm afraid to lose who I am. The Buddha smiled gently and said, when you cling to something that is always changing, you will suffer. It is like holding on to a handful of sand. No matter how tightly you grip it, it slips through your fingers. You see, dear friends, we suffer when we cling to things that are not permanent. We cling to our bodies, but our bodies grow old and weak. We cling to our emotions, but emotions change like the weather. Happy one moment, sad the next. We cling to our thoughts and beliefs, but even those shift as we learn and grow. We create suffering when we say, this is who I am, and refuse to let go. But when we understand anattā, that there is no fixed self, we can let go of this clinging. And when we let go, we find freedom. Imagine you're carrying a heavy bag on your shoulders. That bag is filled with your worries, your attachments, and your ideas of who you think you are. If you let go of the bag, how would you feel? Light, free, peaceful. That's what the Buddha meant by letting go of the false self. Now, this doesn't mean we stop existing. It simply means we stop clinging to something that is always changing. We accept the flow of life. Let me share another example. Think about the word self. When you say, this is me, what are you talking about? Is it your body? But your body changes every day. Cells are born and cells die. Are you your thoughts? But your thoughts are different in the morning than at night. So where is this fixed self that we cling to? It doesn't exist. We are like a flame always burning, but never the same flame twice. Understanding this truth doesn't make life empty, it makes life beautiful. Why? Because when we stop clinging to a false self, we can truly live in the present moment. We can appreciate the changing nature of life instead of fighting against it. The Buddha said, all things are impermanent. When we see this clearly, we stop clinging and suffering fades away. So, dear friends, what can we learn from this teaching? Life is always changing. Your body, mind and experiences are like a river, flowing from moment to moment. Clinging to the idea of a fixed self, this is me or this is mine, creates suffering because nothing stays the same. By letting go of this clinging, we can find freedom and peace. This doesn't mean we lose our identity, it just means we stop holding on so tightly. We learn to flow with life instead of fighting against it. Think of a leaf floating on a river. It doesn't resist the water, it flows peacefully with it. When we understand anattā, we become like that leaf. We live lightly, without clinging, and we find freedom in the flow of life. So my friends, take a moment to reflect. What are you clinging to? What heavy bag are you carrying? If you can start to let go, even just a little, you might begin to feel the lightness and peace that comes with understanding anattā, the truth of no fixed self. As the Buddha said, let go of the false idea of me and mine and you will find peace beyond all words. And isn't that what we're all looking for? Now, we've talked a lot about what the Buddha taught, karma, rebirth, and the idea of no self. But here's the important part. The Buddha never asked anyone to believe him blindly. Let me tell you something that might surprise you. The Buddha didn't want followers who just accepted his words without question. He wasn't a leader who said, you must believe me because I am wise. No. The Buddha was more like a guide, someone pointing to the path, and he wanted you to walk it yourself. He often said, don't take my words as truth, test them, see for yourself. You see, in many traditions, people are told to rely on scriptures or teachers for answers. But the Buddha believed that true understanding can only come through your own experience. Let me share with you a famous story from the Buddhist scriptures. This one is called the Calamas. One day, a group of villagers, the Calamas, came to the Buddha. They were confused because so many teachers had visited their village, each one saying, "My teachings are true and everyone else is wrong." So they asked the Buddha, "How do we know who to believe? How do we know what's true?" The Buddha smiled and gave them this advice: do not believe something just because you've heard it many times. Do not believe it just because it's written in a holy book. Do not believe it just because a teacher says so or because it's an old tradition. Even if it seems logical or makes sense, don't accept it right away. Instead, test it for yourself. See if it leads to kindness, peace, and wisdom. If it does, then follow it. If it doesn't, then let it go. What a beautiful and freeing teaching, don't you think? The Buddha didn't say, "Follow me because I know best." He said, "Look at your life, observe your actions and their results. See what brings happiness and what brings suffering. Trust your experience." Let me give you a simple example. Imagine someone gives you a fruit and says, "This fruit is sweet and delicious." Now, you can choose to believe them and tell everyone that the fruit is sweet. Or you can taste the fruit for yourself. Once you taste it, you know the truth. No one can argue with your experience. The Buddha's teachings are like that fruit. He gave us tools like meditation, mindfulness, and ethical living, and he said, "Try them. See for yourself if they bring you peace and clarity." This is why meditation is so important in Buddhism. It's not about reading or believing. It's about sitting quietly, observing your own mind and discovering the truth for yourself. When you meditate, you begin to see things clearly. You see how thoughts come and go like clouds in the sky. You notice how clinging to anger, fear, or desire creates suffering. You experience moments of peace when you let go of those things. No book, no teacher, and no belief can give you this experience. It's something you must taste for yourself. Let me share another story to explain this. A man once came to the Buddha and said, "Your teachings sound good, but how do I know they're true?" The Buddha replied, "Imagine you are walking through the forest and you see a fire burning in the distance. You don't know for sure that the fire is hot, do you? But if you get closer, you will feel its heat. If you put your hand near it, you will know for yourself that it's hot." In the same way, the Buddha's teachings are like that fire. You don't need to believe blindly that they work. If you practice them, if you observe your mind and live with awareness, you will feel their truth for yourself. This is why Buddhism is not about faith in the usual sense. It's about trust. Trusting your own experience and testing the teachings like a scientist tests a theory. So, my dear friends, I ask you this. Have you ever tried to sit quietly and watch your thoughts without judging them? Have you ever paid attention to how your actions, kind or unkind, create ripples in your life? If you have, then you already understand what the Buddha taught. If you haven't, that's all right. You can start today. Just a few moments of mindfulness can show you more truth than any scripture or argument. The Buddha's path is one of practice. It's about trying things out, seeing what works, and trusting the results of your own experience. As the Buddha said, "Do not blindly believe what I say. Taste the truth for yourself." And that, my friends, is the beauty of Buddhism. You don't need to take anyone's word for it, not even mine. The answers aren't out there in books or doctrines. They're inside you, waiting to be discovered through your own effort and awareness. So, dear listener, what will you do with this wisdom? Will you sit quietly and observe your mind? Will you notice the ripples your actions create? Will you test the Buddha's words for yourself? Remember this. Truth is something you experience, not something you believe. And when you taste that truth, it changes everything. Dear listener, sometimes we understand ideas best not through explanations, but through stories. Stories are like bridges. They connect teachings to real life, making them easier to understand. The Buddha himself often used stories to teach people. Here I will share two stories that highlight the Buddhist approach to truth, wisdom, and the questions about God. Sariputta was one of the Buddha's closest disciples, known for his wisdom and calm nature. One day, a wandering ascetic A holy man from another tradition approached Sariputta and said, "You Buddhists don't believe in a creator God. Your path must be incomplete. How can you reach peace without believing in a God who controls everything?" Sariputta, being calm and wise, replied with a smile, "Friend, even if a creator God exists, that is not a reason to abandon this path. The Buddha's teachings help us end suffering, and I have seen this truth for myself. Whether or not there is a God does not change the peace and freedom I have found through this practice." The ascetic was surprised. "How can you follow a path that does not rely on God?" he asked. Sariputta explained, "The Buddha's path teaches us to rely on our own efforts. It shows us how to understand the mind, live kindly, and free ourselves from suffering. If this path works, if it leads to peace, then why argue about things we cannot know for sure?" The ascetic paused and thought deeply. He realized that wisdom and peace are not dependent on beliefs about the universe. They are found within ourselves. This story teaches us that the Buddhist path is practical. It doesn't require you to believe in things you can't see or prove. Instead, it asks, does this teaching help you find peace? If it does, then follow it. If it doesn't, let it go. The Buddha's path works for anyone, regardless of what they believe about God, because it focuses on what truly matters, understanding suffering and living with kindness and wisdom. The Calamas were a group of people living in a small village. Over time, many teachers and religious leaders visited their village, each one saying, "My teachings are true, and everyone else is wrong." The Calamas were confused and frustrated. They didn't know whom to believe, so they went to the Buddha and asked, "Master, how do we know which teaching is true? How do we know whom to follow?" The Buddha looked at them kindly and gave this advice. "Calamas, do not believe something just because it is written in a book. Do not believe it because it has been passed down through tradition. Do not believe it because a teacher says it is true or because it sounds logical and convincing. Instead, test it for yourself. Ask yourself, does this teaching lead to peace, kindness, and wisdom? Or does it lead to harm, greed, and suffering? When you know for yourself that something is good and wholesome, follow it. And when you know that something is harmful, let it go." The Calamas were amazed. They had never heard a teacher say, "Don't believe me, find out for yourself." They realized that truth is not about blind faith. It's about direct experience. This story is a reminder of how practical the Buddha's teachings are. You don't need to accept anything blindly, not even the Buddha's own words. You're encouraged to question, test, and see for yourself. Think about this. If someone gives you a map, you don't need to believe it's accurate right away. You follow the path step by step and see if it leads you where you want to go. The Buddha's teachings are like that map. Test them and let your own experience guide you. The power of stories. Both of these stories show us something important about Buddhism. The path is for everyone. It doesn't matter what you believe about God, heaven, or the universe. If the teachings help you find peace, they are worth following. Wisdom comes from testing things for yourself. Don't rely on blind faith. Use your own experience to discover the truth. This is what makes Buddhism so unique. It is not about agreeing with doctrines or following rules just because someone said so. It's about finding the answers within yourself through your own effort, understanding, and awareness. A modern example. Let's bring this to everyday life, my friend. Imagine you hear about a new way to calm your mind, perhaps meditation. Instead of believing what people say, you decide to try it for yourself. You sit quietly for a few minutes each day. At first it's hard, your mind wanders, and you feel restless. But over time, you notice something. You feel calmer. You're less angry when things go wrong. You sleep better at night. Now, you don't need someone to tell you that meditation works. You know it works because you've experienced it. This is what the Buddha meant when he said, "Taste the truth for yourself." Before I go, let me ask you this. What if the answers you're seeking aren't out there in books, temples, or arguments? What if they are already within you, waiting to be discovered? The Buddha taught that the greatest treasures, wisdom, peace, and compassion, are inside every single one of us. You don't need to look to the heavens to find them, you only need to look within. Sit quietly, observe your mind. Be kind to yourself and others. Slowly, you will begin to see the truth for yourself, not as a belief, but as something you know, like tasting sweet water after a long journey. The answers to life's biggest questions aren't written in stone. They are waiting to be discovered in the depths of your own awareness. As I leave you now, I'll share the words the Buddha gave to his followers before he passed away. All things are impermanent. Work out your own liberation with diligence. In other words, don't wait, don't follow blindly. Walk the path, trust your own wisdom, and discover the peace that is already within you. So, let's ask yourself, what will you do with what you've learned today? Will you question your own assumptions and beliefs? Will you observe your actions and their effects? Will you look within and trust your own experience as the Buddha taught? Thank you for watching Positive Momentum. If you found value in this video, leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more wisdom to guide you on life's path. Remember, be a lamp unto yourself. Trust your own wisdom, and may you find peace wherever you are. So keep walking, keep questioning, keep practicing, and trust in the boundless wisdom that lies within you. Stay curious, stay kind, and may you find peace wherever you are. Until next time, take care of your mind, take care of your heart, and take care of each other. May you be well, may you be happy, may you be free, and I'll see you in the next video.